What do you think Peter Thiel's primary motivations are, and what do you think the future, the near future holds for as far as his ambitions and what he wants to achieve? And can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
By the way, did you just roll a joint?
No, this is a cigarette. I smoke weed out of a vaporizer thing now.
Okay.
There's a cigarette made up of. I had a chance.
I was gonna say that's fucking amazing. I mean, you'd be the first person to ever roll a joint on my podcast.
I've done drugs on major national outlets.
Hell yeah.
The thing is, I'm gonna smoke a cigarette outside the window, which is actually a bigger deal here. Smoking weed in the house is no big deal, but the cigarette, tobacco stuff. Anyway, yeah, all right, come on, go. Come on.
Was that your cat? Right. Oh, that's cute.
It's a cat.
Anyway, it's just a random cat.
No. It's Sylvia's, my girlfriend's. So to some degree, anyone who wants to know what Peter Thiel, what he believes in, and what he plans, they can find out from Thiel himself. Just read his article on the Dark Enlightenment. I would only add, in terms of his motivations, I think his motivations are very similar to a number of historical figures, going way back and right up onto our times. He wants
fucking cat.
It's really obnoxious. It's always after food and shit, and it goes around anyway, and it's been fed, and it just goes around extorting people.
What? Anyway, so for people who don't know,
I think he honestly believes that that the course that he's in a position to establish for humanity is the best way forward. Yeah, and I think that's true of people throughout. That's true. It's true of Stalin. It was true of Lenin. It was true of Hitler. It was true of Churchill. It was true of Roosevelt. It was true of George Washington. True of Napoleon. True of Julius Caesar. And some of those people I have more sympathy with than others. I just don't think that Peter Thiel is up there with Napoleon or Julius Caesar or Robespierre or Thomas Jefferson or even. I just don't. Based on my experiences with him, and based on the fact, again, that despite all of his power and money, I've been able to give him the runaround several times in coordination with my people. If the idea is that might is right, or that the power, will to power, and all these things, well, it's not quite working out for him because, I mean, it's been 10 years. And the real response from me, aside from all the things that have appeared in the paper about him because of me, and all the congressional investigations that have occurred and been shut short because of me, and the other stuff that's occurred because of me, the real response by a number of us and some other organizations and individuals, journalists, different kinds of people, that hasn't even come yet. But we've played a pretty significant part, both publicly and covertly, in disrupting his enterprises and those of other individuals like him, oftentimes from prison. So I don't think he's up to the task. I don't think he's up to the task of leading the world. And I think that's going to be made more clear in January when the hammers start to drop.
You're releasing your book, right?
Yeah, my memoirs, which have been, for a product of 10 years of research, not just by me, but by Aaron Schwartz, Michael Hastings, all tons of volunteers, so forth, will be coming out. It'll be going to every single major outlet in the Western world, as well as a lot of NGOs. All that's going to be championed by people like comedian Frankie Boyle, Alex Winter, on up to fucking, to anarchist radicals here and there, libertarian groups here and there.
What's going to be the name? What is the name of it going to be?
It's called My Glorious Defeats.
My Glorious Defeats.
That's going to happen. And by that time, the screenplay version that I'm doing with Alex Winter will be floating around Hollywood. Even the fact of even just producers reading it, we have studios that want it, but the point of the fact of it's circulating around will itself help to bring attention to what we have on him and others around him, some of the journalists that he's had working for him, so forth. It will be produced. It will be made into a feature film. I can pretty much guarantee that at this point, based on what I know. At the same time, some major projects that we're doing in coordination with several different, very different groups will launch. And a lot of the, things that don't involve Peter Thiel, will be coming out. And a lot of individual journalists, reporters, editors, and so forth who are still working. A lot of federal officials, ex-FBI, federal judges, DOJ officials.
What about George Soros?
George Soros is already a subject of attention for like the last 20 years. Like that's not somebody whose name people don't know. So like, I don't research him because George Soros wasn't the one spying on us when we were going after Tunisia.
An interesting thing about George Soros to me is that he's labeled as this guy. He's just like any conspiracy theorist automatically wants to talk about George Soros. And you talk about if somebody mentions George Soros, at least in my experience, it's like you automatically like, oh my God, this is a fucking crazy person. This is a crazy conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, that's a phenomenon that applies to a lot of things that are, it's unfortunately it's one of those things. It's because one hears this guy saying George Soros is going to use the UN to kill all the whites in 5 years. Like, then the next person you say, hey, George Soros, like, oh, you're one of those guys. It's the same thing I run into with different issues, because Alex Jones has said something once, or because whatever the fuck. For some people, they think that somehow has, my friend growing up, he had an older brother who's a little douchebag hipster. He was into punk rock and all that stuff, and into like irony for irony's sake in a really irritating way. And him and his old girlfriend, sometimes they would drive us to the movie theater, and he would listen to the Beach Boys. And my friend, who like me despises his brother for all of his douchebag hipster stuff, started hating the Beach Boys. And I said, Caleb, it was Caleb Pritchard. He's now a journalist in Austin. I said, look, your brother doesn't have the power to make the Beach Boys anything better or worse than they are. Okay. Leave the Beach Boys alone. Just because your brother's a douchebag has no effect on and I understand there's a principle whereby like a lot of people who like certain bands, let's say Nickelback or whatever, might be douchebags. And you might be able to develop a framework whereby it's more likely that person to be a douchebag. I get that. But unfortunately, in this society, everything, every statement, every fact, every assertion, especially as of the 2016 election, which luckily I was I was in prison for, safely away from that whole fucking thing. Especially since then, everything is seen in context of how it might be used by the opposition. And so I come out of prison and I'm saying, yeah, like Russian intelligence, of course they were involved in this shit. That's what they do. They're very good at it. But also there were other things involved in this election that have nothing to do with the Russian intelligence, like Cambridge Analytica. By the time I already said Russian intelligence, now I've got people who are, invested in the idea that Russia had nothing to do with the election. And they're like, oh yeah, you're pro CIA. It's like, yeah, I just got out of fucking prison. And, I'm pro CIA. Good job. Yeah. And if I say, yeah, Hillary Clinton was involved in obstruction of justice shit, where she destroyed her own stuff. My mom was charged with obstruction of justice for much less. And so, yeah, of course she got a fucking pass from the FBI, from elements of the FBI. And of course that's going to piss out in the neighborhood. It's like, oh, you like Trump, It's like, no, well, at that point he's president, so I couldn't say what I want to say, but it just everything is about something else. And this Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial, which me and my girlfriend and a few other friends like watched very closely because there's some issues there that are actually very interesting. There's some issues there that are very relevant to me in particular.
Right.
And so we actually watched the trial. We know what happened in the trial. We know what was presented. We know, blah, blah. And, and then after, when the verdict comes, now there's people, now there's all these tons of people who believe that they're feminists and believe that they're advocates for survivors of domestic abuse, who are saying this is a greatest setback for domestic abuse survivors in history. Well, fucking Johnny Depp's finger was cut off by Amber Heard, according to everyone except for her. Johnny Depp, Heard is on tape, like saying, Vince, like, I punched you. Yeah, I punched you. I just hit you, you baby. Yeah. Blah, blah. And like,
you fucking pussy,
over
and
over
man.
Again.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It just, the evidence was clear. I mean, if we believe women, then we can believe Amber Heard when she said she punched the fuck out of Johnny Depp over and over again. And there's no evidence to the contrary. So, it's one of those things where I already know if I go and say, hey, fucking this was actually a victory for domestic abuse people, violence, or anyone who's had to deal with a borderline personality disorder person, And it's also useful because here's someone on the stand who clearly has these disorders that sometimes help people become powerful because they lack all ethics. They can lie. They're willing to lie in ways that other people, would not believe that one would lie about. It's hard to believe a certain kind of monstrosity. These are people who are in high places, and very rarely do they end up getting cross-examined in public where everyone can see, where they're forced to address their lies, and everyone can see what kind of person exists out there.